Welcome back to this week's episode of the 44's View. It's myself, Ryan. Bob is still on parental leave at the moment. He's knee deep in being a father, so he's unfortunately not here with us again, but he will be back next week, so I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for the listeners, but it'll be a good thing for me because I'm soloing this by myself. But look, we're here today with poet Sean Watmore.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the show, mate.
Nice one. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, thanks so much for dropping up. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Shout out to our sponsors, Dublin Whiskey. Always drink responsible, but I think we're gonna have a little tipple, little taste test.
A little sip. Has to be
little
tasted.
tipple, yeah. We get the pop in. Oh yeah. We do enjoy that here.
Is that a sign of?
Yeah, I'll just give you a little mouthful just to give it a go.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, so this is the honeycomb liquor. It's honey based whiskey. I really do enjoy it without it, even though it's not as
Sludge.
yeah, it's not it. It's good, isn't it?
It tastes like more. That's sweet.
That's usually how it goes, yeah. That's what we had Melina Malone on recently, and she was like, that would be really good in a cocktail.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
And I was saying, I think
The sugar's already in it. Or whatever. Honey already in it. Yeah.
I was saying if someone handed that to me with just ice in it, I'd be like, what cocktail is this?
Yeah,
because
that's it. Yeah, it's already got the sugar
that
bit in
little,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But big thanks to the guys at Dublin Whiskey for sponsoring the podcast. But I suppose we'll jump into yourself, Sean. It's just me and you tonight.
Up close and personal.
Up close and personal, yeah. But so poetry is the main theme for tonight. I kind of wanted to get, you're a Kilkenny man, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, born and reared.
Born and reared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for tell us maybe a little bit about kind of growing up in Kilkenny, because last week we had Brinsley McNamara on. He was from Westmead, Weird Ireland. And, you know, is there any kind of weird spots in Kilkenny that you could think about now, or
Weird spots. Yeah, well, all of them.
a few stories there, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm from a smaller village just outside, like 10 minutes outside of town called Bennettsbridge.
Right.
I've always lived there. 10 years up here now, but the accent never goes.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's one thing that I just think if you have a culty accent or whatever, you're not losing anytime soon. So, but I left Kilkenny for university when I was like 18 and didn't really go back after that. Lived in Waterford for a few years and up here.
I think everyone kind of aims to come up to the big smoke.
Well, that's it. Well, it was a work thing. Originally,
yeah.
it was just work opportunities. I was doing some work in Kilkenny, and there wasn't much of it. Yeah. I worked from banks and stuff like that, and I was like, well, might as well just try up in Dublin. And that was the start of it. And then it's like a bad smell. Couldn't get rid of me. So.
Yeah, I've never been to Kilkenny. We were saying this last week, or with Brinsley. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. That Dubliners don't really get out down to the country.
Well, the only doves that come to Kilkenny are stags. So like you go down to Kilkenny at the weekend, and like John Street will just be like lined with buses for stag parties and stuff. So it's generally you'll try and avoid it. But no, I love Kilkenny. I still love Kilkenny. My parents are still down there.
Of course.
And I find anytime I bring anyone down that way now, I have to turn the blinkers off and turn my brain back on to the fact that you're walking around a medieval city and that everything's so fucking old and no matter where you look, there's a church, cathedral, round tower, castle, whatever it is, and that's just kind of like the normal landscape that I grew up around. But now when you look at that, you're like, that's actually quite good. It is. I think it's quite.
And that was that like life growing up. It was just kind of running around and messing about and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, all my school years would have been in around town, and then my younger years just kind of living out in the countryside.
It's one of those things. Like I've been to different places in Ireland. My granddad was a stained glass window fixed, like he's done that in the churches and stuff. Wow. So like I probably have been to Kilkenny. Yeah. But I couldn't tell you.
His work has probably been Kilkenny. Like any number of churches. It's fascinating. That's cool. Yeah. And
like it is like when I was growing up and I was only a kid in those kind of churches and stuff, there was always like room for adventure and stuff. And I feel like, I don't know, with Dublin, especially growing up, there's that kind of urban like exploring or whatever, but I did really enjoy the countryside whenever I got the chance to kind of run around and stuff.
I don't know, there's different like obviously there's different observations to be made from either, but like there's also like the influence you take from either. I noticed that in my writing as well. If I'm writing about stuff from experiences here, a lot of my stuff is writing about experiences, whatever, and I compare that back to maybe stuff from home, or I would have spent a lot of time down with my nannies in New Ross and Wexford.
Right.
And again, it's like, there's a different kind of speed of life, and there's a different landscape and a different everything around you that it reflects in what you write about. So, but I like having. I feel like I've had the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So far in my life, like,
You're doing well.
Yeah, doing well.
And like, so with poetry, so not that it's a niche thing per se, but like for me personally, like growing up, I would have, like, the only poets I would have really known about was when I was doing my leaving cert.
Yeah.
So how was that, like, when did it kind of start for you as, like, when did you first think I want to do poetry? Or
I didn't even mean to. Honestly, I was the exact same. Like, poetry to me, up until 4 or 5 years ago, was fucking Robert Frost, 2 Rose Diversion Yellow. You know that shit? Like, everyone...
It's mad. I don't even remember me leaving cert. Like, Robert Frost is at the doing something.
As a first bit that your brain will go, 2 Rose Diversion or whatever. And everyone will remember that one little bit, like, and stuff. And, like, I'd be the same. I'd never... I definitely was one of the bits I probably would have enjoyed about, like, English or studying English in school or whatever, but I didn't have, like, a massive growth with it, or like I didn't lean into it massively or anything like that. Music, I was always into music. I was big into, like, rock music. I was in bands. I was big into hip hop, and, like, that was the poetry. That was lyrics. I was big into the lyrics of music, and that was, I was always fascinated with that. I was writing lyrics since I was 13 or 14, so I was writing songs. But then the poetry thing only happened, like, honestly, what was COVID, 2020? So 2021. A friend of mine, Damon, got me up. He just said, I have a present for you. Two of us had kind of gone through some stuff in the years before that, whatever, and something kind of just resonated in a book that he had found. It was by an Irish poet called Sean Hewitt. And he was just like, I got this book for you. Think you'd enjoy some of the bits of it. Never bought a poetry book in my life. No one had ever given me a poetry book in my life. It was a brand new medium to me, whatever. And I did. I flicked through it. I was like, this is nice. This is cool. That was it. Yeah. And then, I remember I kind of half wrote something walking through town during all the lockdowns. I remember me and my now wife were walking down Henry Street or something. It was fucking completely dead. Just zombie land, whatever. Yeah. And I wrote something that day when I got home into my, like, notes app or whatever. And for whatever reason, I just kind of went, it kind of looks like a poem. And I kind of, maybe it's just because I'd just been reading poetry, but I was like, it kind of looks like a poem. So
poetry on the brain, like,
that was it. And I typed it up on like a fucking white sheet Google Doc thing. I screenshot it, I put my name in the corner, I posted it on my Instagram. Right. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is really cool. This is really nice." And I thought, "That's cool." So I wrote a couple more. Of my musings went into writing. White square, name in the bottom corner, and then that just became the thing. And then I was like, "Fucking, I might as well set up a page for this." And then that's my page since day one has been that, just a little white square. Yeah. Boom.
See, it's interesting, like, because not as a disrespectful kind of thing, but I've never heard of anyone going straight from to poetry. So, like, I was kind of thinking in my head, was there a musical background there? So obviously there was. Yeah.
Spent years. Like, I started playing. Everyone starts playing guitar. Like, if you can't play sports, you play music.
Play one the wall at the session.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're in Kilkenny and you can't hurl well, it's like, well, what else did I do? So I picked up. My sister had an old guitar. I picked it up. I taught myself how to play it. I wasn't good at playing guitar, so I said I'd try singing. I was better at that. Okay, and cool. So I never got good at guitar, but I was able to write songs and write lyrics. And then self and, like, friends had bands, did well. That was a good portion of my life, 10 odd years doing bands and, like, writing and making albums and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, really?
And then,
what was the band's names?
His first band was The Scenes, and then we were Those Black Marks. It was kind of like rocky, kind of Queens of Stone Age kind of stuff, whatever. But
it's a shame Bob's not here because he's big into all of that stuff, you know. I'm more hip hop.
Poetry out the window.
Well, I'm more into hip hop, so, like, I do appreciate the poetry a little bit more.
But, like, hip hop was my biggest interest music-wise in school. I was like, all, like, Mos Def, Talib, this was the sounds that, like, self and Frank Kieran, like, used to just be flat out, just burning CDs for each other, and, like, like, back and forth mixtapes and stuff. And that was probably more where lyricism came from. It's like how people could just write these massive poems, like real, proper, like, Louis Fiasco poetry, and, like, you're just like, this is cool. And I think I more so reflect back on that stuff now when I listen to it and go, shit, that's, like, really good spoken word. That's really good poetry. Like, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like it's like with hip hop as well. A lot of people kind of get miss kind of the whole idea of what hip hop is because of the like gang violence or like the how it's shown in the media or whatever. Yeah, but like when you listen to it, like, and actually the proper good hip hop artists who you kind of like say Biggie Smalls, Tupac, these were actual poets.
Yeah.
But just because of the whole generalization of hip hop, they weren't looked at it like that.
Yeah. And it's funny you saying that because a generalization of an art form is what I feel probably keeps a lot of people out of poetry.
Yeah.
Because poetry is generalized as stuffy and old books and people in tattoos. And, you know, I don't look like a poet.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't look like what I thought a poet was in school. So, like, you know.
I could imagine when I was in school, there was someone writing with a quill on a scroll.
Big feather pen and, like, you know, but in here's to the same point of, like, you know, hip hop being generalized as a scene as opposed to an art form.
Yeah.
Poetry, I'd like to think, is maybe moving out of that space, and I think there's a great scene of poetry in Dublin that moves it out of this, maybe what people might have this stuffy, antiquated idea of what poetry is, but you can create like, this more urbane or whatever kind of version of it that you're like, oh, this I understand this. I don't understand like stuffy old, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't get that. So
no, I get you, because like again, I would like before I'd been put onto your stuff, and like, you know, we kind of got in contact after the Mesa episode. We followed each other, and that's when I started looking at your stuff, and I was like, because I didn't, as I said, with a poet, I'd say the quill and like old school or whatever, and then it's kind of like, again, with the podcast and what we're doing, like I get to meet people like yourself and kind of get a better idea of what's going on in the culture and stuff. And now, like you're explaining there, that there is a good scene for poetry in Dublin. Like is that what you feel like is happening?
And I would myself see myself still in the observatory kind of position. I think there's obviously different, and I'm no Bastien of truth when it comes to this. I don't like. I'm only giving you what I've learned, but
of course, that's all we can say.
You know, like I'm not going to claim to be some kind of person who understands it because I don't. But like for me, I guess there's like page poetry, and then there's like spoken word, which is different to poetry. And like I think spoken word in Dublin is massive, and there's so many great artists that are doing spoken word. I don't necessarily lean into that as much. I prefer I like writing something down. I like removing myself from it sometimes. I kind of going, here's a poem. Someone else can take it off.
Do something with it. So it's funny when you say spoken word, I'm instantly brought to 21 Jump Street. And he's like, Julia, Rob hurts.
Rob hurts.
Sorry, I just that pinged into my head, and I was like,
it's a good thing I got that, or that would have been just dead air.
Cynthia, she is dead. But like with that, like again, that might be me generalizing spoken word as like that comedic value of what 21 Jump Street done. But like I'd like to think I'm very open to going, like, and again with the podcast we have kind of set ourselves to go to like guest events and stuff, and like go buy the club or buy the albums and stuff, and it is something that now, like, I've been listening to your stuff on Instagram, and it's like I'm happy that I found it, because it just means that I'm kind of opening up a new kind of perspective to what poetry is.
And a whole, like, as you know, someone born and bred in Dublin, you're probably opening up a whole new view of your own city. You know, I think actually it was this in the one you did with Mazer, and I think Al made a really good point in that when he's talking. I think you were talking about who's your man that does the big Evoke.
Evoke.
Evoke. And it was, but like you mentioned about like how it's really hard to get to places and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think Al's response to it was, it's just nice that it's a different view of the city. And it is, because you're on a train, you're on the Dart, and you see under a bridge where someone has written a word, and you go, I don't normally look up there. But art has directed my observation. And I think art is an invitation by nature. It's inviting you to look at something or take something in from a way that you might not have already done.
Right, yeah.
And in the same way as this, like, you know, graffiti tagging that has drawn your eye to a part of the city you didn't look at before.
Yeah.
It's invited your observation. I think poetry does the same. Spoken word does the same. It talks about things that you might get, but maybe through a new lens. It might invite you to look at somewhere, something, someone that you didn't previously look at. You know,
of course, yeah. And even maybe like because when I listen to hip hop, say for example, you kind of put yourself in that person's shoes because of the story that they're telling. And then again with the poetry, then it's like you're living through the lens of someone else's mind or their thoughts and stuff.
Absolutely,
and it's a really cool concept. But again, I think just the way I grew up, I would have never looked at poetry bar the leaving cert and stuff like that. But it's nice to kind of to have that new idea of what it is and kind of see it as you said, like guys, beards and tattoos can write poetry, like
yeah, for sure.
And it's funny, like, because growing up, I've said it a million times in the podcast, I always wanted to do music, and I tried to write down stuff as well, but I was very like trying to rhyme and with band at the end of each word. But with poetry and like with your writing as well, it can kind of flow, and like it is a little, because you're obviously really fucking good at it.
Well, thank you.
But with me being like a nobody of knowing what poetry is and trying to, as I said, rhyme band and or whatever, it's cool to see. Like, what is the kind of writing process for you? I know you mentioned the kind of the force when you're done was COVID. Like when you're walking down Henry Street, you're kind of observing. What's it been since then? Like, is it like, how do you kind of put a piece together?
Like the way I think, as someone who used to write music and lyrics, and I would consider myself creative, whatever, or have been for a long time, but through different forms or different kind of versions of form. I would say that writing poetry is probably the first time that I have been completely trusting of myself and what I'm creating. And like by that I mean, like when I used to write songs, I used to be quite like precious. Like I might be writing about a subject matter, and I'll sit on it for ages, and I'll go back and I'll edit it and I'll change it, and I'm like precious about, is it right? Like fixate on it a lot. And maybe it's because my mind is like, I'm probably only going to write about this once, or I'll probably write this, like this has to be the one.
It has to stick or whatever.
That's it. Or like, it's a story about something that happened in my life. I'm probably only going to write this incident once. Poetry is just so expansive. You can write the same. I can write about this glass from 10 views and write 10 different poems, because that's what you get to do with poetry. You get to just be an observer of every angle and facet through different lenses. And I think when I kind of realized that, I was like, I became so much less precious about it. And so I am like quite an observer. Like a lot of stuff I write is like observational, like see something while I'm sitting on the train or something, and just an idea comes and I go boom, 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 boom.
And are you constantly doing that?
All the time. Notes app is full, like
writing about me next.
Wait till you see
the 41st View podcast. What a blast. Sorry, I had to do it. I read a really good story today.
I heard this from some philosopher.
I fucking wish. But you're kind of observing as you're going along, and I think that's really cool, because I think a lot of people maybe miss what's going on around them.
Yeah, and I think people might miss what's going on around them, but I think another thing, and this is again like position of authority on this. It's all about just how I feel about it. But like I think maybe some of the reasons why I was less drawn to or warmed to poetry when I was younger is, I would consider myself to be like smart enough to understand something when I read it. But not a lot of poetry, or at least older poetry, it's not always accessible. It can be quite verbose, the language can be quite
it can be quite difficult.
Symbolic, and that's great, and it's supposed to be, and I respect the fact that it's supposed to be.
You need a thesaurus to figure out what's going on.
Whether it be the actual words used or even just the concept, like the conceptual kind of how it's explained, sometimes it can do that, and I'd be the first to say that happens to me. But I like writing like accessible poetry. I like writing something that I can understand and someone else might understand. And I always come back to that kind of like, whenever I'm saying this to someone, I kind of compare it to like musicians I would think of, and like I would take Rory Gallagher as arguably probably the best guitarist of all time. And like, but technically he could play whatever the fuck he wanted. Did he? No. He might play 3 notes in a way that makes people cry. And it's just like, having the ability to do something, not a prerequisite for doing it. It's knowing, like, John Frusciante, when he's like, 3-note solos, it makes people go, he could go, blah, 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 but he chooses not to, and he chooses to use his capacity to create something, and making simple stuff good is fucking hard. Like, it is. And like, 100%. But I love that. I love writing really short form poetry, like a few words. Like if you can say something a few words, like my favorite poem that I wrote is like 5 words long, and it's just because if you can get something across in a few words, I think.
What one is it?
It's a poem I had in a competition recently. It's just called Lucky. How lucky I am to miss you.
Nice.
And for me, that poem just came from a place of like sadness has to come from a place of goodness. You have to miss something for when it's gone. You had to have loved it a lot.
Yeah.
So how lucky are you in the first place to love something so much that you miss it now?
Yeah.
And like that for me, that was just the same. Like that Smashing Pumpkins lyric is like, you know, who wouldn't be the one you love?
Yeah.
Like, who wouldn't want to be that person?
Yeah.
Like, I love stuff like that. When someone can take something so massive and condense it down, that's hard. I think that's incredible. Like.
Yeah, and it kind of with this maybe short form, it's maybe easier for people to grasp.
Yeah.
Because and then you can kind of, because it's only 5 words, it's easier to kind of take in.
Yeah.
And then put your own experience on that.
Yeah.
And then figure it out. Whereas like with a long form poem, it's like.
And there's place and time, and like everyone has their own taste, and like again, like I have no position to. I'm saying my preferences and how I choose and do things, whatever, and what works for me. But like, yeah, I really just kind of, I think I found myself in that kind of shorter page poetry, short form, just like, you know, not overly kind of like being precious or not overly kind of analysing what I've written,
trying to overdo it like I'm a poet and this is how good my work is. It's just more, I'm a poet. It's simple for everyone to kind of grasp. Is that the thing? Yeah.
And also you can like, simple doesn't mean it's not complex. So like you can write something quite simply in words that can have a surface interpretation, and that's fine. And 90% of people might only want to take the surface observation.
Yeah.
There might be layers below that you meant that other people can infer. And I always get messages of people on Instagram being like, "Oh my God, this poem has meant so much to me. It's got me through such a moment or a time." And they've created their entire situation around your words. I didn't write them for that reason. I didn't write them for that reason.
I get you,
But someone else can do that, and that's so cool.
Yeah,
like, that's what's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it feels great to hear stuff like that as well. Yeah,
it's crazy, like, you know.
And like you mentioned, when you went to college in Dublin and like you were working in banks and stuff, and you kind of came into poetry late, but you were interested in it. What was the kind of the medium of like working beforehand? Was there something like, did you get to a point, and then obviously COVID happened, you just mentioned the book that your friend gave you and stuff. What was the kind of like the journey from like working in the bank and stuff and then finding yourself in poetry?
Well, so I still work full time. Like, this isn't paid away, unfortunately. Of course, it'd be great.
Yeah.
It would be great, but I also enjoy the work I do. I don't work for banks anymore. I work in like kind of tech companies, and like, you know, I've spent the last 10 odd years working in like investigative work. Like I've done financial crime, counter-terrorism, like, you know, a lot of like investigative work, but it all, for me, it comes back down to having an eye for things, being an observer, being inquisitive, asking questions. So like I found a way to apply my personal passions to make money. And like I think that like I'm grateful of the fact that I can do that. And like, you know, that I can do my 9 to 5 and do this on the side and have the mental capacity to do the two.
Both,
you know, and like at the end of the day, work pays the way. But like this is such a nice thing to be able to do myself. It's why I kind of went down to like self-publishing and all that route. I was like, you know what, I just want to have all the autonomy in the world on this, and I want to do it in my own way, at my own pace, and you know, make the decisions.
Independence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like you mentioned there, you work for a tech company and you're very investigative and stuff like that. What's the kind of like? You seem like a kind of very intelligent person when I speak to you. If that's if that's all right to say.
Working.
But like with the when you're doing your observing and stuff, as I said, like when I'm trying to do and ban and sand or whatever, like where does the kind of, how is it like putting a puzzle together when you're writing? Like when you like, what's the kind of, because I know if Bob was here, he'd be able to tell you, when he writes a song, he comes up with the title first, and then the lyrics come after. Whereas our old producer Limo, he would do lyrics first and then kind of find the song in that. Is that, what's your kind of way of writing when you?
It's again, a lot of stuff comes from observation. So whether I see something or hear something, and it just sends a little light bulb off of either in my head, I'm like, that's a nice picture, or that's a nice sentiment, or that's a nice like doorway into idea or ideology or construct that people think about that might be interesting to talk more about. And
there's an awful lot going on.
And there is, it's non-stop, like, you know, and like I think like there's always something there if you're looking, like, you know what I mean? And like, you know, I was like got the train home earlier, and I was at the Lansdowne station, and there's like little stalactites hanging off the underside of the platform. I was like, how the fuck did they get there? But then I started writing about it, and I was like, it's just an observation that turns into something. And all of a sudden I wrote a poem, and I was like, that actually reads quite well. I was like, that's quite nice, but it's just...
So it can be a quick process.
Oh, I write very quickly. I generally write stuff in one take.
Yeah.
Just as it comes into my head, I go, bum, 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 and then I close it, and I put it away, and I'm like, all right, grand. And then that's just, and so the quality of that is subjective. Like, it could be shite. Like, it probably is. It doesn't matter, but this is what I mean about I'm not precious about it anymore. I'm not trying to write poems for them to be good.
Right,
I'm writing poems to articulate a thought that went through my head and made me go, oh, and I went, okay, write it.
Okay,
And I think I was like Bob Dylan, I read an interview Bob Dylan for, and he was like, the biggest thing I ever had to learn was to finish. And because he used to start things and never finish them. And it doesn't matter if they're bad. A finished idea is better than like half done one that you're always going to go, should I go back to that? It's like, just finish it, and you can come back and decide if it's good afterwards. But like, I think that's definitely, I'm just not precious with my writing anymore. And I am precious afterwards in terms of what I choose to share or put into my books or like kind of trim down. But I don't stifle my writing process with any level of, is that good?
Yeah.
I did that a lot.
And you did for a while, wasn't it?
I used to do that a lot when I was writing stuff for bands and stuff. I used to constantly.
Well, I think maybe it's different in the sense of like, say when you're writing a song and you're saying you want this one to be the one that sticks because it's something personal to you and it's maybe hard to put that out into the world. I know we discussed that with Melina, but with like if you're saying a stalactite on a train station and you don't really, there's nothing personal there about it until you kind of maybe like, and like if it's just something random like that, I'm just trying to pick your brain about how it's kind of like brought together. Is it kind of like, what's the kind of ideas around it? Like, where do you, like a stalactite hanging from Lansdowne train station? Like, how do you get a poem out of that, basically?
Answer is, there's no point in me trying to bullshit and say I know, because I don't. And I think that's probably what's in just the soup of creative thought, is that sometimes things just trigger ideas. And like, I can't even remember exactly what I wrote, but it was something about like, how this is formed, how hundreds of thousands of feet have gone over it, but something so delicate is held on beneath the weight of so many things that have happened around it. And then even in my own brain, I started kind of going, well, that's nice symbolism of like strength under adversity, of like something that's kind of held on against all odds. And it came about from the stupidest thing, and I didn't plan to write that, but I observed something and I went, that's funny seeing that there.
Right.
And that's kind of what most things I see is like, oh, that's caught my eye. Why has it caught my eye?
Right.
And if you think about it for long enough, you probably come up with something. I think most people will, like, it's just...
my brain capacity is like, I'm just like, oh. Then I'm like, what's on TikTok? Yeah. But no, it's cool. It's mad, like, how your brain works in that sense, because, like, never in a million years would I be like holding on to strength and adversity, thousands of feet going. Like, maybe it's just we're wired different, obviously, but like that's really fascinating. Like that you can kind of figure all that out in your head, and maybe it's just my brain's just splat. So
it's just like strengths and competencies are completely irrelevant. They're relevant to the individual. They're not relevant to the world. They're like, as in like there's any number of things I can't do. Like, there's a much longer list of shit I can't do than I can do. And everyone would say that. But like,
it's nice that you found this medium of
exactly.
Because that maybe a lot of people that maybe do think the way you do, maybe some people might not have found poetry as an outlet to kind of get their thoughts across, and they might be stuck in this like kind of prison of their own mind of like not 100%. Being able to get it out, because I know, like, and I'm not afraid to admit it, like I've always wanted to, as I said, write music and stuff, but I was just, for me personally, I never felt that I was good.
I get you.
Because I just couldn't put it together, and I'd get bored and I'd move away from it, then I'd find something new to do.
I always think that's like, I totally get what you mean, and I always think that's just like probably just like a sad conditioning of like it is like, like but no I mean like a sad conditioning of society that's made people not value their own output, or maybe we all compare our output to
the best, to
what other people are, or like like when someone says I could never look like that, or I could never write like that, it's like, we don't have to, like, like a friend of mine, Sam, he's a painter, goes under the name Tag Beckett, and I remember he said one of these lines that's just stuck with me forever. But he was talking about his own artistic process and how he paints and how he found his style of painting. And he just said, like, for him, the most important thing in like art was finding your own strokes and learning to love them. Yeah. And like his style is quite like slapdashy, kind of like, like very kind of colours bright in your face.
Okay.
but someone could, like, it's all subjective. Someone could say it's shit. Someone could say it's good, but that's art.
Like the podcast.
Someone could say it's good. Someone could say it's bad. That's art.
Yeah.
But the point is, he found his strokes and he learned to love them. And that's how I feel about my poetry. Is it's my way. First and foremost, I write for me.
Yeah,
I write
of course,
to process my thoughts, as you said.
Yeah.
Get stuff out of that prison or whatever.
Yeah.
If someone else likes it, class. You know, I didn't do it for that reason. It was my way of finding my strokes and loving them.
Yeah.
And I just think he just has such a good way of putting it. But I think, unfortunately, we're all too afraid of the competition that other people are better. And, you know, and then we put ourselves down before we get the chance. Irish, like, Catholic guilt, and we're like, I'm in the mud, I'm shit. Like, I can't, you know, it's like you're straight away.
Poor
like,
13-year-old Ryan was definitely comparing himself to 50 Cent in the game and Lil Wayne, and I was like, this is not, you ain't got nothing on him. You ain't got nothing on him, Ryan. Just give up, son.
Why is he writing about guns?
But, I was like, I've never held a gun. But let us know about the book. How did that come about? Was that just like you had it?
I'd written enough. I don't know. Like, I was in, like, I'd written a lot of stuff, and I was like, make a book. I was like, and then I had no idea where to start.
Yeah.
I like talked to some people that had books that, like, you know, from varying levels, to like people that had done it at low levels, to people that I knew that had, like, you know, under big publishing agencies and like hundreds of thousands of books and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, one person kind of gave me the feedback of being like, it might not be what it's cracked out to be, like, you know, you might lose a lot of it to that. And I was like, okay. I did go to a few publishing agencies, spoke to a couple. None of them really took me. I wasn't really taken by kind of what was on the table, and what, I don't mean like monetary, it's not about that. I was like, it was like how they wanted to do it.
Right,
and like, you know, I was like, oh, fuck, maybe I could just do this myself. And I had no idea how to, but I was like, right, I can figure this out. Like, my job is figuring stuff out. I was like, I'll work out how to make a book. So from
Let me just write a quick poem about how to start a poetry.
Never get the book done. Yeah. But it did. It just became like a project right, well, you've got I had my best friend Kieran, is a graphic designer, and I was like, right, my friend Brian, who does most of my tattoos, did the artwork. There's a lad in Dunleary I know who has a printing place, and prior to the book, I'd been making like framed prints of a lot of my poems, and I was selling them, and I was using that to create capital to make the book. Right. So everything was self.
Kind of fall into place a little
bit. Yeah. So I kind of just went, all right, I can put all this together, and then I made this. And
tell us about the name of the Buried Beds and bicycle frames.
So that's it's not mentioned anywhere in the book. So, but I mentioned it when I did my book launch. I kind of told the story where it came from. But my granddad, my mum's dad, my granddad, was a big person in my life growing up. Before he died or whatever, and someone I really looked up to. That's him. And like, you know, I had like a lot of kind of just like love and time for whatever. But he was a real kind of country man out in the garden always. But my mum's family, like growing up, hadn't fucking much whatever. Of course, he used to make stuff work. But obviously, a lot of the time, couldn't afford to get rid of stuff. So what he'd do is he'd go out to the garden and he'd dig like 8-foot trenches, and he'd bury stuff, and then he'd just plant spuds over it or whatever. So really? Like he used to dig like fucking 8-foot trenches, put all the old bikes, all the bed frames, whatever they couldn't scrap, to the bottom, backfill it, and then grow spuds over it. So I always thought that was a really nice image, the idea of buried beds and bicycle frames being out in Granny's garden, and like, you know, he put them there and someone might dig them up one day, and I just always thought that was a really nice image.
Could you imagine in 1,000 years and they're like excavating and Annie's gaff, they're like, whoa, there must have been a war of bicycles and bed frames. Sorry, that was a nice.
But that's So no, but it was, and I like. It's a. Yeah, it's just like, it might seem.
And like pulling all the poetry together to put into it. What was that like? Was it a difficult task, or because I know when we had Brinsley on, he discussed like he had so many other stories that couldn't go into Weird Ireland.
I love his stuff. It's so good. When I saw that he did one, and I was like, oh my god, I could listen to that man all day.
Well,
but the stuff that went in it, I had like, I think there's 100 odd poems in that. Maybe. Yeah. I had more than that. I had maybe like 150 poems written since, and I mean everything written. I have like one big Google Doc that I just put everything into from my phone. Eventually, it all transfers. And I kind of went, I was like, well, geez, there's definitely more than a book's worth of poems in that. So I started going through and kind of like picking out ones, going, oh, geez, I'd never put that in a book. That's like, it's a nice poem, but not for a book. And eventually, I came down to a list that I was like, yeah, I'd like these. Some people write poetry books that are very thematic, like, you know, this is a poem, or this is a book kind of about love poems. They all kind of blend through. They're all following a theme or whatever. This isn't. This is a collection of my first poems, It's a collection of moments in my life, like thinking back on moments, observations of moments, observations of life, observations of everything. It's just it's just capturing what is happening in life, and I think that's just kind of how I enjoy to write.
And was it like, I know because you mentioned about being difficult to write songs and release them, was it difficult to, like, I know you said you don't mind when you write a poem you can put it out, but to put it into a book, was that easy, or was it was it difficult to kind of release as well?
The hardest bit was
getting all put together.
Spell check, like fucking I'm so bad for them. Myself and my friend Kieran, right up until like the last week, we had the cover spelled wrong. We had 2 R's and buried, and then the two of us were like, fuck, we went to school together for our whole lives, and we were like, hang on, is it 1 or 2 R's and buried? Anyway,
it's like trying to spell necessary.
I swear to God, it became that thing of I read every word just like like just like this, being like, have I spelled anything wrong? And it probably is a spelling mistake, and if you've ever found one, don't tell me. But I'll
highlight it and send it over to you.
But yeah, that was it. Other than that, compiling it was good. It was a joy. Why wouldn't it be? It's like, such proud of myself.
I was just asking because like I just was wondering if, like, when you completed it, was it like, oh shit, this is real now?
Yeah.
Can I put it out? Like, was that wasn't an issue now?
It wasn't so much. Can I put it out? I think I almost held back hitting print on just for longer than I probably needed to, because I was just committing to finishing. Was the kind of hard bit with a book, because like, even though I'd done every spell check and every check I could, I was like, as soon as I hit go, that's it. I'm gonna get X number of copies back, and that's it. But eventually I was like, well, that's the plan. You know, that's why you've done this. So just hit go. And no, I'm happy with it.
That's good. Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to giving it a go, because just judging by your Instagram, me and Cotto were only talking before you came on, the Guinness one you done.
Yeah,
it was sick, man.
Class.
And like now, like after listening to it and kind of hearing the story about like the white snow. What was it? Snowdrops going fall. Like now I'm gonna look at a Guinness in a completely different angle. You know,
it is just that close up when you just see them all hitting upward into it, and you're like, that's like really soft snowstorm.
And is that's obviously like kind of how, like, you're obviously had a few Guinness in your life, I'm guessing.
1 or 2.
And then like, it's kind of maybe again the observation. It's really interesting to see, because with myself being like not in that kind of background, I wouldn't look at a Guinness like that. But then when you hear someone saying, you're like, holy shit, that actually makes a lot of fucking sense.
And that's honestly that's what I love. I think another great poet in Dublin, Jeff Finnan, Jeff the poet, he puts himself out as, but like he I was having a coffee with him recently, and he just he said something to me about poets or poetry, poets being like the torchbearers in life, i.e. the person who sometimes shines light on something, or sometimes on themselves, sometimes in a hard way, for other people to think on something, to observe something. It could be something nice like Guinness. It could be something like, I write a lot about my own mental health, and don't mind talking about, like, I've gone through bad depression, and I write about that. Like, I find that my ability to articulate that, or myself, and like decompress it into words, if even one person reads that and goes, I'm getting something from that, then fucking win. Like, and I think that's a good way of putting it, like that idea of being the person, the torchbearer, the person who shines light in the places where are nice to look, but sometimes are hard to look like, so.
No, it is. It's definitely one of them, like, because, and like, without having this conversation with you, like, and it kind of puts not a little bit of context to your poetry, but like maybe now I can understand that why it, like, maybe it's a little, like, you think a little bit deeper and a little bit more kind of out there, in a sense of you've gone through something, so like you're happy to pour your heart out and to kind of deal with what you went through, or 100%. And like that's one of those things. Like we had Mark Donnelly from How's Your Head, the mental health clothing brand, on, and we talked about mental health, and it's like it's the same with the podcast. Like I'm open to talk about mental health. Like 100%. it's for me, it's just a water off a duck's back. Like it's just what you have to do to kind of get through things. And now I think when I read your poetry, then I'll get that kind of idea of that there is a deeper meaning to, because as I said, when I read poetry, it's kind of like when I listen to the lyrics and you don't catch it the first time, exactly. And then you maybe hear something about the artist that they were going through something at the time, and then you re-listen to the song and you're like,
sudden,
holy shit,
100%.
that's where it is. That's 100%. What it means. That like
and I think, and that's like again, accessibility of art in general. Like again, I'm not advocating that it has to, but I think accessible art naturally offers so much to so many. And you know, now don't get me wrong, I do write kind of quite introspective or deep or whatever things that happen in my life. I also love writing funny shit. Like I really like.
Did you do one for Mother's Day recently?
Yeah.
What was that? I can't remember. Sorry, I'll have a little look. Because I do remember looking at it and laughing. Yeah,
well, I do. I enjoy like writing funny stuff. But again, I come back to like what's the Shakespearean tragic divine, or tragedy comedy. Like the two kind of interplay with each other all the time. And like if you kind of have a balance of the two, you need that levity sometimes. You know, like life is not all doom and gloom. Sometimes you can bring that out, and sometimes even like the funnier or the more kind of jokey poems might still have an undercurrent. I wrote something the other day.
Sorry, it was the April Fool's one that I was laughing at, not the Mother's Day one.
But even like there was one I wrote the other day, pavement penises, and I know, and it'll sound funny, but all it was it was currently me and my wife are trying to like buy a house. Yeah, I was going through like some job struggles, trying to like secure a house, and like a lot of shit going on in my head, and like really stressful and like hurting my heart kind of stuff that was not going right in that moment. And I was walking over to Tesco, and there was a couple of kids drawing dicks in the pavement into West Cement, and I wrote a poem about that. And like the first couple of lines are like, as I'm battling incessantly with these horrible things, and then I see kids drawing it, and I remember it's just funny to draw dicks, and that's the last line home. It's just funny to draw dicks, and it's like, you know, it's like someone might just laugh at the last line of that, but the first few lines of that are like tough. Like, I'm struggling, but like I found a way to laugh.
And I'm sure it's nice to see, like, and again, like when I was talking with Mark from How's Your Head. You do need to find the funny things in life as well. When you're, and it's always when you're kind of maybe going through something, and then the funnier things that you find are like really. But I just wanted the April Fool's one that I was talking about. BB's not a C word. Trump's not a tool. The world isn't fucked. Ha, April Fool's. I do remember looking at that and laughing. I was like, that's actually
But again, and then. So Jesus, that couldn't be a more sensitive subject. Like,
of course.
That couldn't be a more like kind of horrible, horrific subject matter. To not make
especially
fun of.
With that
but to call upon the fact that there's such horrible atrocities that happen in the world and are happening, but you can still find time to, balance. And like we need it as humans. There's so much shit in the world to not try and give yourself some balance of headspace.
Oh, of course, no, it's definitely like, and that's the same. The podcast is my outlet for, like kind of escaping, not reality, but like escaping I wouldn't say mundane life because I have a 3-year-old daughter. But like, because I work from home, so I wake up, drop the baby to creche, come home, walk all day from home. My missus goes and collects the baby. I'm at home, have my dinner at home. The baby goes to bed. I sit on the sofa, watch the telly. So every Monday I get to come and do this. And then like I'm doing other things from the rest of the week. But you definitely do need those outlets to kind of express yourself and do your own thing. And as you said, like maybe with your poetry, if one person gets to kind of get something from it, I think that's what a lot of people miss with maybe like trying to be successful or trying to be a singer or be a musician or be an actor or be this or be that. And like what a lot of people would do is kind of look at the people above me like, I'm never going to get there. And I think it's when you realise that, and I've definitely found it with the podcast that, because I said it before, I was like, when I first started, I did want it to be something that I could stop working for and do it full time. That's the dream, When you first go in, you're naive to everything, like and how difficult it is, and how trying to focus on who you have on, and like it's a lot going on in the background. And then when you get to a point where I'm at a point now where I get to talk to people like yourself, like Mesa, like all the 112 guests we've had on. Well, not 112 guests. We've done some episodes by ourselves because people don't answer their IG DMs. But to get to like to speak to people and you find a new outlook on life. And you find a new reason to do things that you're doing, and then you kind of think to yourself, it's like people that aren't doing that are the ones that are going to try to bring you down.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
And I'm sure you felt that yourself, have you? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Because especially with poetry, like, I'm not to be disrespectful, like, when I thought of poetry when I was younger, I would have thought, like, airy fairy kind of, like...
Absolutely, yeah. But that's what we all did, like, you know, and especially even taking more into the kind of the senses of masculinity that we would have grown up with as well.
It would have been feminine.
Like the modelling of masculinity that would have been created in the 90s when we were growing up or whatever, like, it definitely wouldn't have led you to feel that as an option that you had an accessibility to or that you could do, whatever. You'd shy away. People, lads especially, would shy away from that stuff. Yeah. So you're shying away from something, and then what is there, you don't feel accessibility to because it's either highfalutin, convoluted, you can't understand it, whatever it might be.
Or the boys might give you a bit of stick.
Whatever. And like, but how nice it is to come to a point now where those aren't the cases. We've grown, we've matured, we've broken down some of like previous social taboos and stuff. Shit like that. And like, how sad it was that they were there. You know, like thank God I'm of a generation that has come out the other side of that. But like, how sad it was that they were there in the first place, and how many amazing artists didn't express themselves
because of it.
Didn't come out. Didn't come out artistically because of a fear. In the same way, in the same way, how many people didn't become what they could have been because of that? And I think if we can all continue to just open ourselves to these things.
Well, I definitely think we are the generation that are kind of changing that kind of perspective on masculinity and stuff, because, and like, I'll always say it to, well, like, at the end of the day, there are still people out there that think that way as well.
Yeah, of course there are, yeah.
But like, that's just the way, and I'll always say I try to surround myself with people that are like-minded rather than trying to shut people down because they have a different opinion to me. I just kind of, I don't like to get into arguments anymore about it because it's just not my thing. Like, it's, but I think the more people do, like myself and yourself, kind of speak up about and do our own things without the stigma of what do the boys think or what the society think, then you kind of get to a point where you're like, fuck it. Yeah. I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the main thing about it. Yeah.
And you think of like again, I had no real concept of what poetry was, but I think everyone who's grown up in Dublin in the last 10, 15 years knows Emmett Kirwan and knows of the poetry Emmett's made and the impact he made in terms of spoken word. But like, he's a prime example of when a stereotype got broken down, not just a stereotype of what the poetic artistic form used to be, like this kind of like airy fairy whatever, but also what someone with that accent could do. People that would have generalised and heard that voice and where he's from, they would have gone, you're not writing, pal.
Up there,
so, do you know what I mean? They would have. And like, you know, he broke down multiple stereotypes and multiple social expectations through that, and I think that opened the door. There's so many like great Dublin poets that do that, the likes of whether it's Eamon O'Brien or Jeff or Leon or all these lads that do these amazing kind of spoken word pieces, and they all have an inner city Dublin accent or whatever. Like that's something now, and it's one thing I don't have. Obviously, I have a fucking country accent. What do I know? But like when you hear lads who can take this and express themselves and maybe continue to break down these past kind of ideologies or taboos or whatever you want to call it, it's great.
Yeah, and where, like, I wouldn't have a clue. So what would be places for people to go in Dublin for spoken word or like poetry events and stuff? Is there anywhere kind of that's doing it themselves or?
Yeah, like I know there's the Dublin's Finest. Again, I'm not as involved in that side of things. I've definitely
just if
more
people
into
are listening and they're kind of like,
I know like I'll send you more afterwards when I look them up. But I know like the Dublin.
We'll put them on the stories.
Dublin's Finest is one of. They do. I think there's like open mic nights. The Smithfield Creatives do a lot of open mic nights. I think Eamon O'Brien has. Last time I spoke to him, I think he was planning some new poetry night in Dublin. There definitely are more than that, and I know I'm probably missing some. But again, like I said, I myself am not as involved in doing spoken word, but I respect it so much as like the other side of the coin that I might be on or whatever. I think it's amazing that there's more and more opportunities for people in.
And talk to us about the competition, the national poetry competition.
Oh that was just
that. I did know about it before. I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's the most prestigious poetry competition ever.
Either did I, honestly, as in, like...
But I did look it up when you were coming on. I do like to do a little bit of digging into people. But from what I've read, it is a very established...
Yeah,
and like,
I'll be honest, I didn't know it either. As in, like, you know, I'd enter the odd kind of competition here and there. It's also, like, as a self-published poet, the number of things you can enter are less because generally they don't necessarily take
bastards.
Well, I don't know, maybe it's just one of those kind of things in the industry. I find it strange, but they take stuff that comes from publishing houses versus self-made, whatever. So this is just one that doesn't. It takes all applications from anyone. And I just thought, oh, fuck it, I'll throw something into it last year. I forgot all about it. So it would have been one of maybe 4 or 5 that I threw something into and heard nothing back from any of them. So why would I? And then they got back to me being like, oh, it was that poem Lucky, that short one.
Right.
They were like, that poem made our long list of like 100 poems from 20,000 or something, 21,000.
Wow, yeah.
From like 115 countries or something like that. And I was like, no way. And they were like,
little old me, huh?
Yeah, little old me with his 6-word poems. But no, but it was one of those things. But again, I read that and I went, cool. Obviously, I'm fucking proud of myself. That's
really
great.
cool, yeah.
But it was only afterwards I shared something online about it, being like, oh, cool, this cool thing happened. And then a few other friends like posed me like,
oh my God.
They were like, no idea how hard it is to get on that list. And I was like, really? And I was kind of maybe naive to it as well. But no, I'm proud of myself. I think that was it was a cool one to kind of get that recognition, and again to get it as a self-published artist, which I don't know, maybe just has a little less credibility.
And have you been able to read all the competitions poetry, or is that all on the hush?
Yeah, no, but not all the competitions, just the winning stuff and the other the what you call it. There's like a winner and then there was like 5 runner-ups or whatever. So some of that stuff, it's great. I love it. It's all, but it's very different as well. Like compared to even what I wrote.
Okay.
So it's always interesting.
The
like it's
Slovakian poetry was difficult to read. Was it?
Couldn't quite get my head around it.
Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. I gave you a shout before you came up, and I asked, would you be happy to read a poem?
Oh yeah.
Have you got anything that you have
prepared?
You
asked me, I wrote something because you asked me about live the moment.
Oh yeah. We can segue into live the moment.
Yeah, well, if you want to start, because I wrote you something relative to that.
That's perfect. So
do something new for you.
So every week when we have guests on, our sponsors Dublin ask us to ask the guest, what does live the moment mean to you? Yeah. So you have a poem for us.
Yeah, well, as in,
perfect.
Probably the majority of what we've talked about is my poetry style is observation of moments. That is what, like, life is moments, and they're always happening, and they're there to be seen, they're there to be observed. Do what you want with them, kind of thing. But so like I'm a strong advocate of that. So I said I'd write you a poem in that vein. So
thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Live the moment.
Live the moment.
Live the moment. Do not postpone it, or it could be gone before you even know it. Because moments don't last. It's not in their nature. They exist and expire. Some more can replace them. But that's why they're precious, unique, and worth grabbing, these moments in time made for sharing and having. So live the moment. Do not postpone it. Taste it, embrace it. It's yours, so own it.
Sick! I'm not getting goosebumps there, bro. Honestly,
nice
that's
one.
Fair play, man.
Cheers.
That's definitely getting clipped up. Definitely sending that to the clips.
Happy days.
No, that's deadly, man. That took you couple of days.
This afternoon.
Yeah,
but again, and I'm writing
stuff in a short
even put
the drink in and all, man. Fair play. He's on the ball, this fella. He's on the ball.
But I think writing stuff in a short amount of time is not always testament to quality of writing. It's to being that's what I said. It's the first time I trust my writing nowadays. So I just do it quick, and if it's there, it could be shit. I don't care if it's shit, but I'm like, it's just the idea.
Like, I know something's good when I get the kind of...
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks. I really do.
Hair standing up at the back of my neck, but you'll definitely have to send that over to us.
Absolutely.
We'll get it done somewhere. Have you got anything going on moving forward? Is there any kind of work that you're looking to do? Or
I've got a short, like, chapbook, a small book that I've just finished called Frémica, which is the Irish for roots. It's a book of like 20 poems that I'm going to release shortly. A friend of mine, Kate Power, did all the artwork for it.
Kate Power?
Yeah. You know Kate?
Kate's my second cousin.
Go away.
She does all the Celtic design.
Yeah, Kate did all the art for it. Yeah.
She done Nilo's
she had Nilo's stuff. Yeah.
That's mad.
So
Kate's. So my granddad and her dad were brothers.
Go away.
So what does that make us? Like second cousins or something?
Your cousin did the artwork for a book. I can't seem to open it.
Yeah, she does really good stuff. I actually have some artwork from her that I bought during... there was some week on where all the pubs had, like, on Vicar Street, kind of Thomas Street, there was like artists and stuff. Sick. Yeah, she's deadly at that stuff, isn't she? I didn't even see her posting that 27th of February.
Yeah, there's no one else that would have done it. Like, as in, it's basically...
Shout out Kay. Yeah, come on
shout out.
next.
But the poem is basically about, like, plants in Ireland, traditional links to like old mythologies, magics, all the kind of stuff that Ireland has created, like so much history around.
And when, but do you have an idea when that's coming out, or
I need to print it. It's maybe in the next.
It's on the way, folks.
In the next month. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm trying to buy a house right now. So. House and book.
Please buy his book.
So yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
My second. That's kind of like just a little stopgap thing. My second book. I've got most of that written now, so I'll probably try and do that early next year.
Yeah.
I've tried to write a small kids book.
Oh, nice.
I'm just trying my hand at just different styles.
See, I have a 3-year-old, so like I read all the books, and it's like, no disrespect to the authors, right? But some of them get away with more.
Really?
Like 5 pages, and it's the cardboard pages.
That's
it's like,
not enough, is it?
I don't know. I mean, if it's good, if it has a bit of something to it.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff that I'd read to my daughter, like, 'cause she likes a story before she goes to bed, and it's like there's one called Dear Zoo. Right? And I know this one because it's so easy, and it's like, we went to the zoo. I wrote a letter to the zoo and asked them for a pet. They sent me and then it's like a flap down, and it's like an elephant, but he was too big. I sent him back, and then it's the next one, and it's a lion. He was too scary. I sent him back, and it just goes on. And it's like, they sent me a dog. It was perfect. And then that's the end.
And that's it.
And I'm like,
okay, I did better.
I'm like, I paid €15 for this book.
Like, where's the substance?
Obviously, an elephant's not good enough to be a pet. Like, who was running the zoo? Who was going to send a lion to a 4-year-old child?
Why did you leave the dog to last?
I know, like, that's not number one. But no, that's really cool, because now there are some books that are like, I remember there's a book, and my mum bought the books from Lily, because it's the guy's son passed away. I don't know what the name of it is, but he wrote stories of his son kind of going on adventures and stuff. It's beautiful. I'll, if I get the name of it, I'll put it on I'll put it on the post, or I'll send it to you. But I have them all at home, but they're beautiful. So like, some books are really good.
Well, let's say like I've written something. I'll send it to you. You can read it. You can test it.
I'll read it I'll just have to. I'll have to do some pictures myself.
Well, let's say I want to try and get like a whole artwork.
Because I'll be sitting there with my phone in my hand reading it. She's like, "Daddy, where's the pages?" I'm like, shut up! I know this guy. Go sleep.
They're coming soon. But
No, that's really cool, man. And I wish him all the best moving forward. I'm so happy we kind of got to connect over. And that, as I said, it's the beautiful thing about the podcast. You know, when people reach out, and we can kind of, I can find new people, and that's kind of doing these cool things, and that's what we're all about, is trying to highlight people's stories and how they got to where they are, and like what they're wanting to do, and like hopefully people listen to this and they're like, jump on and grab your stuff. And
at the end of the day, it's all, like I said, like
it's all like a
art
community.
is an invite. So like, if any art form invites you to look at something,
you're
take it,
offer,
seize that. Like, you know, I love that. Like, and that's why, like, I think what you're doing is great as well, because I love that too. If I see someone I didn't know, I'm like, cool. Like, it's another option or opportunity to see something. Like,
and I think getting to know people for what they do, rather than just saying what they do and not know much about. I think it makes me anyway. I connect to people's music, or like their short films, or their books, or whatever. I connect myself a lot closer to them once I've had a conversation with them. And I think that's the beauty of it, you know.
100%.
So thanks so much for dropping up, mate. We really do appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, honestly. It was great.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm a YouTuber now, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I have to say, I like, share, and subscribe.
Point to the button.
There's a if you want to watch next week's episode, click here. If you want to subscribe, click down here. But no, if you made it this far, look, we always appreciate the support. If you get a chance and you're interested, go and buy Sean's book. And we'll catch you next week. Bye.